This presentation is on chapters 12 and 19 of the PA School Law Handbook, specifically talking about curriculum instruction and charter schools. Chapter 12, curriculum and instruction is based on section 22 of the PA School Code. And in there, the curriculum instruction are entirely based upon the academic standards, which are the foundation upon which local school boards design their curriculum and instruction. Academic standards are required to be are available for the following content areas: ELA, math, science, with which is now called STEEL standards under our new science standards that have just been released, social studies, arts and humanities, health, safety and phys ed, career education and work development, family and consumer science. These standards are developed by PDE and approved by the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education is required by law to review the standards every 3 years to make sure that they are updated and that they are rigorous and appropriate for the state. School districts use the standards to create plans by which they manage their curriculum and their instruction. And there are two types of plans that require PDE approval, which have to be submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and also plans that need to be available for local public instruction. So the professional education plan needs to be updated every 3 years and reviewed, also submitted to PDE, as well as the induction plan for new teachers. That's done every 6 years. Every 3 years, a special education plan needs to be submitted, and every 3 years, if there is a pre-K program, an implementation plan must be updated and submitted for that pre-K program to PDE. So those are the ones that have to be completed. They have an entire public review process, which is, as stated here, 28 days prior to the school board approving and submitting to PDE. There must be a minimum of 28-day public review process available before the board votes to approve it and submit to PDE, and they have to happen on that timeline. Plans that are necessary for local public inspection include the comprehensive plan for K-12 student services. That's a giant plan for the entire district that, as it says, is comprehensive to cover all district services, and that needs to be updated every 6 years, as well as the gifted education plan, which is required to be updated every 6 years. All right, for curriculum, that is governed by sections 1151 and 1605 of the PA School Code. And in that school code, there are minimum curriculum requirements that have to be met. Chapter 4 of the State Board of Regulations places into effect requirements for school levels and courses for all students. So I just created a little kind of cheat sheet here, and it reflects the handout of what schools must do, what schools can do, and what parents can do. So schools must abide by the PA School Code and the Chapter 4 State Board of Regulations. Schools must instruct on specific topics per law and regulation. That's ELA, math, science, or the STEEL standards, social studies, arts and humanities, health, safety, phys ed, career education and work, and family and consumer sciences. And schools must offer grade level learning plans in both K-3 bands and by grade 5 if students are not proficient. So that relates to the assessment measures that are stated in the education plans and in the comprehensive plans. If a student does not make proficiency level in grades K-3, the school must offer some type of a grade level learning plan to bring them up to proficiency, and then by grade 5, they must be proficient or have a plan in place to help them get proficient to grade level 5. Schools must also provide parents an opportunity to review plans, curriculum, instructional materials. Schools can offer credit bearing courses for summer periods. So they can offer additional courses that they may or they can offer credit for during the summer. They don't have to. Schools can offer driver's education, but it is not a requirement. If they are offering driver's education, schools can charge a fee for that. So that is no longer a right that students have to the driver's education. It is an option that schools can provide. And if they provide it, they also have the option to provide it for free or at a charged rate. In terms of parents' rights, parents can have access to the information. That's one of the things that schools must provide, so parents can take the initiative to access that information. Parents can excuse their students from specific materials due to religious conflict. We see that a lot around the PSSAs when we ask parents if they want to opt out of the PSSAs, they have to review and do that on a specific set of content or a specific conflict, such as religion. And parents can assert the rights of their children not to participate in dissection. So just because it's in the state code and just because it's in the board of regs as a requirement does not mean that it must happen. Parents do have some rights to access information and opt their child out of it based on religion or based on an opposition to something such as dissection. In terms of instruction, there are 180 days of instruction minimum required at minimum in the state of Pennsylvania. But how those 180 days of instruction happen and what constitutes a day of instruction, it depends on the age and the grade level. If there is a pre-K class and also for a kindergarten class, a day of instruction is a minimum of 2 hours and 30 minutes. So that means it can be a half day, could be the instruction time, but for a day that needs to include at least a minimum of 2 hours and 30 minutes to be counted towards the 180 days of required instruction. For grades 1 through 12, it's a little bit different. In addition to 180 days of instruction, there's also a requirement for a total of 900 hours over the course of the year for grades 1 to 6, 990 hours over the course of the year for grades 7 to 12. So if you've participated in looking at your building schedule, if you've ever been part of a committee to figure out busing schedules or extracurricular schedules or length of day or anything like that. I know we've had big discussions about this in leadership teams around Act 80 days and when our teachers get in service and what constitutes a half day and how we do that. It's a twofold requirement for instruction. 180 days minimum over the course of the year and either 900 or 990 hours for the grade level. And the hours come into play because when you start to figure in, let's say, elementary school, things like your recess, like your lunch, those types of things count for different levels of hours. So it becomes a giant algebra problem to figure out your schedule. But there are instructions and there are resources in the school code to help figure that, and there are requirements of how that has to be. So if you think about the 1 hour delay, 2 hour delay, 3 hour delay, I know in my personal experience, when I was a kid, 1 hour delays happened fairly frequently. We live out in the country. That was an easy low bar to attain. 2 hour delays were like gold. You could actually like eat your cereal and watch cartoons in the morning before school. A 3 hour delay wasn't even a thing until right before COVID. The neighboring district did a 3 hour delay, and now that's a thing in our county. If you really need to get the kids into school because you're like running up against your minimum days or you're going to be having to juggle around snow days, the 3 hour delay became a thing. And then, of course, with COVID and FID, that all went away. And now we don't even get enough snow to require us to have snow days. So all different kinds of things that as instructional leaders we need to be aware of so that we can make sure we are meeting our fiduciary requirements in terms of the instruction. Okay. Going further into instruction regarding textbooks. Textbooks technically have to be recommended by the superintendent. Now, how the superintendent gets that recommendation can be a local determination, but officially textbooks are recommended by the superintendent to be approved by the board, and that has to happen between April 1st and August 1st for the upcoming school year starting the end of August or into September. So that's the window for approval of textbooks by the school board. Textbooks cannot be changed without the superintendent recommendation or a 2/3 minimum approval vote of the school board. So the school board can override the superintendent, but in general, the superintendent's job is to make sure the textbooks are vetted, recommended for approval, and they cannot be changed without the superintendent recommending a new book or recommending an alternate. Students have to have access without discrimination for instructional purposes to courses, to counseling, to getting assistance for employment. Obviously, this is an older student situation, to athletics and any other extracurricular activities. So you start to hear a lot about different laws that come into play with things like extracurricular, with athletics and all those kinds of things. But these are the determined aspects of instruction that students must have access to in their school day or in the course of their school year. Graduation requirements are covered under Act 158, generally require completion of courses and grades, a culminating project, and proficiency in state standards. We have graduation pathways through things like the Keystone exams, a remediation program, AP or IB exam scores, acceptance at a four-year school, or other evidence that can be approved by your school board. This is a big deal in my world right now as far as helping students to graduate. The school board can also set additional local school graduation requirements, such as community service, if it's a requirement, and if so, how much, dual enrollment and what the parameters for dual enrollment are, requirements and additional requirements for participating in graduation ceremonies. I'm thinking of things like eligibilities, minimum attendance, that kind of thing. If an expelled student is allowed to complete their high school coursework, if they've been expelled and can't be on the property, but they are allowed to continue working remotely on their high school coursework, then they must also be allowed to receive the diploma, even though they have officially been expelled. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We also have alternate pathways to graduation that can include things like a full matriculation and completion of 1 year or at least 30 hours of post-secondary education, passing a score on the GED, completing secondary school curriculum while at juvenile detention center. So there's lots of ways to help students get through high school and get to graduation. But there's also requirements with some teeth to them. In terms of instruction, non-public schools can work with Pennsylvania Department of Ed or IU to purchase and lend textbooks and instructional materials. Local districts have no responsibility to or for non-public schools in their service areas. Sections 1327 and 1612 of the Public School Code are the reference points and the legal requirement points for non-public schools. And students who attend non-public schools may attend programs and receive services from public schools. So there can be a collaboration there, but local school districts do not have responsibility for what goes on in a non-public school. Home education programs, homeschools, governed by Section 1327.1. There needs to be a parent or a home education supervisor who administers the program of learning. There needs to be an annual acknowledgement of compliance. The superintendent of the local residence school can request additional information, can hold hearings if they find out that there's a suspicion that there's not adequate instruction happening. They can also require students to attend public school depending on that additional information or the hearings that are held. Schools can loan materials. Students in home education programs can participate in extracurriculars at their local public school, but a school diploma will not be granted from the local public school to a student who is participating in a home education program, even if they participate in those extracurricular activities. Finally, in curriculum and instruction land, there is vocational technical education. And basically, just kind of summing this up, we have apprenticeships, we have cooperative VOTECs, and we have tech prep programs. The difference is an apprenticeship is competency-based. It's instruction and work-based employment. So you're working part of your day, you're getting additional instruction. Usually an apprenticeship is paid, the employer is involved with the actual instruction. You have a mentor on the job site, and you're also taking classes or getting accreditations in some formal educational structure. Cooperative VOTEC is an alternate in-school and vocation paid work program was planned and supervised by school with employer input. So that's our VOTEC schools. We call them career and technical centers now, not so much VOTECs. But the cooperative program is when you're in that VOTEC and you go out during the school day to work with an employer who is working closely with your teacher, and the teacher or the school system is monitoring that work education. A tech prep program is secondary and post-secondary program that leads to an associate degree or employment. In my county, we have tech prep programs with RAC, specifically with Schmidt Technology Center through our mechatronics program, where it's a 3-year program at VOTEC, but the last year is pretty much housed 3 days a week at RAC. So students go 2 days to their high school VOTEC, 3 days to RAC, and they're working towards an associate degree while they're still attending high school. That's a tech prep program. Okay, Chapter 19 is about charter schools and cyber charter schools, and this is governed by Section 24 of the PA Code. In this section, we're going to talk about funding, enrollment, and oversight procedures for charter schools and cyber charter schools. But first, let's define them. A charter school must be organized as a public nonprofit corporation. It cannot be a religious school. It must comply with right-to-know laws, and it is protected under the political subdivision of the Tort Claims Act. So it's similar to a regular school, but not all the way, because it has to be organized as a public nonprofit corporation. It has a different organizational structure. Charter schools are different from public schools in that they are exempt from public school facility regulations, with the exception of those regulations that pertain to student health and safety. Only 75% of the professional staff of a charter school need to be professionally certified by the state of Pennsylvania. So you can have 25% of your staff that are working under other criteria, which can be found at that section code 24, PA Code 17-1724A, B. Charter schools are exempt from much of the public school code and from the State Board of Education rulings. Charter schools, unlike public schools, can limit admission to who comes through the door. Public schools operate under the doctrine of FAPE, free and appropriate public education, but a charter school can limit who gets to come into their school based on particular grade levels, based on targeted populations of at-risk students, or based on an area of concentration, such as math, STEM, arts, communication, something like that. However, any of those limits must be stated in the charter, and we'll talk about how that happens in the application process for that shortly. There are two other types of charter schools, regional charters and cyber charters. So typically a charter school is sponsored and chartered by a single school district, and that's a one charter school by one district. A regional charter school receives its charter from more than one district, so it's regional. It has a couple of districts that have come together to create this charter school and are sending their students to there. That means that there are multiple districts that are sharing oversight. But whether a school registers as a regional or a single charter school must be decided by the applicant. It cannot be a coercion by the sending districts. So the districts can't say that we want you and require you to be a regional charter because it changes their pay structure. The actual charter school and the people applying for the charter school get to decide if they want to be regional or local. And that's their choice and their choice alone. A cyber charter school uses technology to deliver its curriculum instruction. Its charter comes from PDE, not from an individual district. So regional charter and a regular charter school have to be chartered by a local school district, and they provide the first round of application review. A cyber charter goes straight to the state and is approved directly by the state. It should be noted that both a regular charter school and a regional charter school and a cyber charter school, all three of them, can take students from any geographic area within the state. They don't have to be only local to that specific place where the chartering has happened and where the homeschool is chartered. Charter schools have an application process, must be started by individuals, teachers, parents, by an individual, by teachers of the place, by parents, could be a college, a corporation, a museum, anything that's non-secular, or it could be a combination thereof. But it is started by somebody, not the sending district. There are 17 pieces of information required for approval. You can find more information about that in the PA School Law Handbook. It is approved by the Charter School Appeal Board, also known as the CAB. And Charter School Appeal Board is the group that handles the application and the final approval and handles any kind of disputes. There is a strict timeline for chartering and for the school board action that is associated. When an application is submitted to the school board, the clock starts, and there are within 45 days of the application being received, there must be a public hearing by the local school district board, and then within 75 days, there must be a vote to grant or deny the charter. Regional charter schools can have hearings together, but their votes must be separate for each sending school or each chartering school. Regional charter schools would have the same timeline. The application evaluation hinges on demonstrated sustainable support to maintain the charter as an ongoing entity, and that's kind of the first level of review. There are minimum criteria required by law. School boards can have additional local criteria. A charter will be granted for 3 to 5 years, could be renewed for 5 years with a full-scale comprehensive review. If a local district denies a charter, there needs to be a written opinion, a signature petition by the chartering application group to resubmit. There can be a revision and a resubmission, and then the timeline restarts for another review of that charter. There is payment involved. The resident school district has to pay for school-age children attending a charter school. It is not a tuition, but it is a payment process based on the budgeted total expenditure per average daily membership for the prior year, minus or less the expenditure of the district of residents for all non-public school programs. So there's a formula there, and that formula is managed through PDE Form 363. The payment is expected within 12 monthly installments, and if a district fails to make payment, then the Secretary of Education can deduct those payments from that district's subsidy. Any enrollment issues, all school-age children in Pennsylvania are eligible for any charter that serves their population. Notification to the home district within 15 days of enrollment or withdrawal. The charter school cannot discriminate in enrollment. The district cannot impose enrollment caps as a condition of granting the charter. If applicants exceed the amount of available space, there has to be a random selection from qualified candidates. So qualify the candidates first. If there's still more candidates that are qualified than there are spaces, then it has to be a random selection process. Students may be enrolled if they are suspended or expelled from their home district. But if that happens, then the district may not be financially responsible for the charter fees for that suspended or expelled student. Charter schools are LEAs, and they are responsible for providing special ed services. They can contract with the district or the IU to provide those services. If they're going to bill at a special ed rate, they either have to have the student pre-identified before they arrive at the charter, or there is a collaborative process that they must do with the school to get information about how that special ed rating and assessment has happened. Outside of that process for billing, there is no requirement for the charter school to consult the district of residence to provide special ed services. However, the charter school cannot discriminate based on disability, and if they fail to provide adequate services, they can be shut down. In terms of transportation, the school district provides transportation to its resident students who are attending a charter school. Obviously, that is not necessary for cyber charter. So if you're going cyber charter, you're working from a computer, from anywhere, you don't need transportation. The school doesn't have to pay for you to get anywhere. Charter schools are responsible for any additional costs of special education transportation for their students. So if you need a special bus, if you need additional van service, if you need aides on the bus, the charter school has to pay for that, not the sending school. Extracurricular activities must be available to charter students. The same rules must apply as they do for the district students. Fees are okay for charter students if they reflect the district's per student cost to participate in the extracurricular activities. So it can't just be arbitrary, has to be backed by actual budgets and legitimate costs. District teachers can take a 5-year leave of absence from their district to work at a charter, which I think is very interesting. Again, there's a 75% certification requirement for professional staff at a charter school, but teachers at a charter school are not protected by Article 11 of the school code, which covers tenure, dismissals, demotions, layoffs, those types of things. Charter school personnel do have the right to collective bargaining, and they do have the right to PSERS retirement funding. School districts must annually assess the charter school to determine if the goals of the charter are being met. That is a school district oversight requirement. The district, to do that, needs ongoing access to information with the charter school. The charter school has to have a comprehensive review before their 5-year renewal. Any non-chartering districts who send students but are not holding the charter do not have a right to challenge the issuance of the charter or to have oversight. And local school board members cannot be the charter trustee. So you can't be on the local school board and also a trustee of a local charter school. And that's it. Thank you for listening.